Nation in Conversation is proudly brought to you by AFGRI, Engen, Grain SA, John Deere, Monsanto, Nedbank and Senves.
Good day and welcome to Nation in Conversation from Nampo Harvest Day. I am Matlo Kala. Remember to follow us on Twitter at Nation Converse. The Nation in Conversation app is available in the App Store. For more information, please visit our website, nationinconversation.co.za. There are various risks that impact significantly on the agricultural sector. Take drought, for example. It impacts on these risks and it stretches far wider than the farm as well as the agricultural operations. These impacts are not only on the farmers, but also on other stakeholders. Now the question remains, how do we manage these risks? Our panel today include Kit Barron, Senior Strategy Manager at the Climate Corporation, John Hudson, Division Manager Agri from Nedbank Business Banking. We have Jason Brantley, Managing Director from John Deere, as well as Mike Stead, Commercial Fuels Manager at Engen. We now start discussion with Kit Barron. Kit, first explain to us what does Climate Corporation do? Furthermore, give us the risk content in which you operate in.
Sure. So the Climate Corporation is a software company based in San Francisco, California. We are owned by Monsanto, and we build software and sensors for farmers. Our mission is to help farmers optimize their operations by getting the precise data about every decision they make on their field, about the soil composition of the field, and the specific climate that their growing region's located in. And coupled with the information about the hybrids, it's a tremendous amount of data that we can allow a farmer to manipulate, to analyze, and to ultimately inform the most precise operation on a farm.
So it is information driven.
That's right. Yeah, we really see a world in which agriculture becomes digitalized. For centuries, farmers have had deep knowledge about their own fields. That knowledge has been passed down from generation to generation. But with the advent of new sensor technology, tremendous breeding programs like seed companies have, the sophisticated agricultural equipment that's generating reams and reams of data about the field, this is a whole new world for farmers. And what our platform does is it makes it very easy for farmers to bring all of that data together into one place and begin to analyze it using deep agronomic software.
Oh, okay. And then speaking of technology and the new softwares, John, how has the banking sector and the financial overall evolved over a period of time? And what are the risks that are associated with these developments?
Thank you. I think from a banker's point of view, it is really important to take a long-term view when you're dealing with the farming sector, because droughts such as this, as the one that we have at the moment, tends to be a short-term event. Although in some areas it's been 3 consecutive years of drought. So I think what's really important from a banker's point of view is to really work very closely with their farming base and to really understand the different risks that they face. Because essentially risk, I guess, is split into 2 parts. One is business risk, which is really everything that the farmer faces in producing his product and getting it to market and getting paid for it. And then financial risk. And essentially financial risk is the risk of taking on debt. And I suppose often the question is, so how much debt does a farmer take on board? And that's where I think commercial banks have a role to play. And as the banker for the farmer, you need to know your client's farming business. You need to really understand it. You need to understand that business risk, because that impacts on the repayment of debt. So from a banker's point of view, we certainly try and guide our clients into having the right structure in terms of debt, and then as to how much debt they can take on board. And that whole process tries to take into account the good times and the bad times. But really what we say to our farmers is you need to look at your risk strategy and do it in the good years, because that's when you need to build up those reserves to help you through these tough times. So I think commercial banks need to take a long-term view. We understand that there are long cycles that are at play as well. So going into the drought such as this, there's quite a long lag effect, and then coming out of the drought, there's also a lag effect because of the long cycles at play.
Okay,
so I think it's really important that banks stay very close to their farming clients.
Okay. Speaking of the lags and the impacts, but I imagine part of the debt that your clients accumulate, they use it in order to support Jason's business, or is that not the case?
That certainly is the case. John Deere provides equipment solutions as well as technology solutions for both large ag commercial as well as smaller emerging farmers across Africa, and access to finance is one of the critical pieces to accessing this capital equipment. Our farmers face a lot of risk, and I think one way to think about it is, and in the context that we look at it, because we think about how can we help them manage it, it's around the risk that the inputs that they're using or the work that they're doing is not going to have the best possible outcome. They want that best yield from the seed. They want to know that if they have below average rainfall for the year, that they have the ability to be able to maximize the outcome from that. They need to know that their investments are going to be available and working when they need them. They need that uptime. And they need to manage their costs. They can't let costs get out of control. Farmers work many times on very narrow margins, right? And so they need to make sure that when they're making decisions, they can manage that. So when we look at the portfolio of solutions that we have, we focus on really trying to help manage that risk, and our dealer channel also is very active in helping support customers in that.
So you're saying that you're not only providing equipment and machinery, but you do way beyond that.
Absolutely, yeah. It's the complete solution that really delivers that value proposition to the customer, and that's what we focus on.
Speaking of complete solutions, Mike, in this country and many Southern African countries, the issues around energy have been just worrying everywhere you go. But then from the energy side, how is risk managed and how is your involvement in that context?
Okay, I think if you look at our supply chain, it's quite vast, and we have various risks across that supply chain. So right from sourcing of crude, which the country is dependent on imports from elsewhere in the world, there's geopolitical risks. So if there's issues in the Middle East, how do we manage crude supply? So we diversify and get product in from various ports. We have weather conditions, as we've mentioned with the drought, but we at risk from high winds. We can't berth ships, and the refinery is a continuous operation, so ships have to berth on a very frequent basis, and there's a continuous process running behind that. So very high coordination is required to mitigate those risks. And then through the manufacturing supply chain, and then all the way up to our customers in the farmlands. And how do we manage those supply chains, be it pipelines that are national assets, be it rail facilities or road, and it's then coordinating all of those efforts to minimize any disruption to getting product to the final end user.
Speaking of those minimization, I just want to go back to you, Kit, just one more time in the context of now. How do you handle the risk as it moves furthermore into the value chain? I mean, how do you absorb it, or your clients absorb that risk to cushion the rest of the value chain?
Yeah. Well, we're all about helping farmers make the most optimal decisions for their particular field. So, in the event of a drought year, for example, a farmer may not want to plant the same high population that they would in a different kind of year. Or they may want to change the way they fertilize after they've planted. And so what our tools try to do is bring visibility into the climate, the soil, and the specific management practices that they're making, and help them adapt based on the circumstances of the day. So one example, we have a product called Nitrogen Advisor in the United States. If there's a large rain event over the weekend, and I've just applied a significant side dress application to my field, a lot of that nitrogen may have leached out of the soil. Our software, coupled with an agronomic model, helps the farmer identify that a lot of that nitrogen may no longer be available to the plant, and that the plant may be in risk of poor performance. So based on that model, the farmer might get a notification on their cell phone and say, oh wow, there's a leaching event. I may have to rethink the management later in the season. I might have to go back out in the field when the field's dry again and do another side dress application just to make sure I'm not under fertilizing.
I think when we come back from a break, we just want to discuss the same question that I asked a kid about how now the risk moves through the value chain and how do you deal with it from your situations. But for now, I just want to thank Kid Barron for the insight that he gave us. After the break, we will be joined by Kobus Steenekamp, and we'll be back in a moment. Welcome back to Nation in Conversation. Joining us in the studio now to continue our discussion on risk mitigation is Mr. Kobus Steenekamp from Monsanto. Let's continue the discussion with Kobus. Briefly, tell us what Monsanto is doing around the question of risk and how is it doing further in terms of mitigating some of those risk factors.
Good, thank you, Matlo. So Monsanto is a global agricultural company focusing on yield solutions. So through various yield enhancing technologies, germplasm, and also biotechnology products, we try to increase the farmer's yield, ultimately to make sure that we produce yields sustainably. That is our big drive. And later on, we will discuss some of the methods that we use to mitigate the risk for the farmer. But we always need to remember the risk mitigation starts with the farmer. And the farmer has various decisions that he has to take up to the end point where he harvests the crop. So, for instance, a farmer has to take more than 40 decisions from the time of deciding what hybrid to plant up to the point of harvesting the crop.
Okay, thank you. And just continuing on the impact and the effects of risk. John, earlier on you indicated that the farmers do not need to see the drought as a once-off event, but basically take a long-term or medium-term strategy. But given what we've been through, from the financial crisis and now this, do the farmers operate like that, or they operate like human beings? That they live for today, they think about tomorrow, but overall 5-year, 10-year term, does it apply that way?
Yes, I think what is clear is that a farmer has so much to really manage in his farming business. So if you look at the diversity of skills that's needed, it is massive. So whether you're talking to Monsanto, John Deere, or possibly Engen, all of that information is coming back to a farmer, and then he has to make that call in terms of what's in the best interest for his farming business. And so I think with farmers, part of that needs to extend beyond what is good today, and as you pointed out, planning for the future and looking at various risk factors. So one might well be the drought, and for example, I think a lot of good work has been done by the likes of the WWF and their agricultural sustainability program, which Nedbank is actually sponsoring. And I think out of that, there's some really good information that is starting to come to the fore. So, farmers really have a lot to think about. But if you take it one step further, if you look at farming businesses, they are largely still family-owned businesses. So then you start to look at succession planning and other risk factors which tend to impact on the business. So continuity of the business is not only about drought, but it's about a number of factors. And pulling this all together is really the farmer's challenge. And who does he turn to, and who does he work very closely with, and which one of those people would be his financier. So I think the financier's got a massive role to play in the farming business, as well as the whole value chain. And that's what you picked up on is the value chain finance, or the value chain itself. And even within that chain, what we're starting to see or emerging is strong value chains. And I think value chains as well, or stronger value chains, have a better chance of surviving through difficult times. So, value chain finance is also coming to the fore, which might or might not include the financier.
Okay. we'll pick that point later. But the interesting part is where you do indicate that financing and the sustainability that is required. So I go back to the earlier point you raised, Jason, about working with small and medium farmers. And since you're providing technology and other solutions, to what extent is the profile of a farmer? And here I'm thinking about their background, their experience, their level of skill, as well as education to some extent. Could that be a barrier towards accessing the solutions you're offering, or in what way do you go around that?
Yeah, it's a great question. What we found is you really have to think about the entire ecosystem that small and emerging farmers operate in. And so we work closely with partners across the value chain, as well as others that aren't represented here today, that allow us to help the farmer get access and to understand the types of things they need to run their business. And to go beyond that, training is really one of the key things. Getting the knowledge, having the open dialogues and discussions about the types of choices that they have to make as farmers and what those outcomes are. And so we spent a lot of time focused on that. Since 2012, we've trained a little over 33,000 farmers across sub-Saharan Africa in basic areas of agronomy and mechanization, even how to run a business, how to know if you're making money or not, and balance your books. Those kinds of skills really help people have much more success as they move into farming and then move forward.
Okay. So, but what I'm hearing is that the decision making, in as far as risk management is concerned, it's not so much about the individual, but it takes place somewhere along the chain, or you follow a particular trend. Is that something that we find in the oil sector? Recently, we have seen some fluctuations, the oil prices coming to a long-term low. What are the risks again? How did you manage that for particularly the users of your product?
So as far as the users go, we are focused really on trying to ensure sustainability of supply. And for us, that's a key determinant in all of the actions that we take. So there'll be people in our supply trading operations that will be looking at mitigating against various fluctuations in world prices and how those filter through the system. And each one will be looking at identifying risks, and then a system of then collating if there's any really significant risks that are lying, really outliers. We term it as I guess clicking time bombs. How do we manage those unthinkable events that sitting out in left field? So each division along the supply chain will understand each of those risks and put plans in place to mitigate. And I guess that's all focused at the end of the day to ensure that the ease of doing business at the end of the day and ensuring the business of the farming customer at the end of the day is made whole.
But are you able to apportion a certain share of that management to agricultural risks? In other words, that is agricultural sector affected by those risks more or less compared to manufacturing, mining, or is just overall risk?
I don't think we isolate agricultural in any specific way. Obviously, the environmental risks in agriculture are that much more pronounced than perhaps other areas, but we find the construction business equally affected by adverse weather conditions and the like. So I think it's a matter of really just making sure that each part of the supply chain is putting the barriers up so that if there is a risk that comes through the system, that it's at least caught by one or two mitigations that we have in place.
Oh, okay. But you, Kubas, on the other hand, you operate in the agricultural sector. And from the supply point of view, as well as the ability to move forward, how is Monsanto really providing that? Again, taking into the context that we still have developing farmers or smallholders who need to deal with these risks. It's not their choice, but they have to deal with them.
Yeah, so I think it's important in South Africa, we need to recognize that we have a whole spectrum of farmers, and one is not more important than the other. So what is important, if we start with the commercial farmer has a huge responsibility to ensure national food security. So we need to look after the commercial farmer of South Africa. This can be a white farmer, colored, Indian, black farmer, irrespective race. But what is very important for household food security, we need to look at our small subsistence farmers, because they, on the other side, play a critical role also to make sure in that specific community that they will have enough food available. And what we see today is more and more people go and live in big cities, so we lose that capability of people producing food for themselves. And that's why companies need to step forward, help the South African farmer to produce more food, but with that, we also need to provide solutions to mitigate the risk. Because the drought risk, for instance, is now the talk of the day, but that exposed the small-scale farmer as well as the commercial farmer. Unfortunately, the small-scale farmer, subsistence farmer, maybe has a 10 hectares or a 20 hectares, and it is in one area that can be hit by drought. In the case of a commercial farmer, there's much more diversity with regards to the areas that he can grow his crop.
We will look deeper into those solutions when we come back from a short break. Welcome to Nation in Conversation. Before we went to the break, Kubas just mentioned the issues around food security and how they are related to risk. But now what I want us to look into is that how do we communicate, how do we educate some of our people, be it consumers, be it anywhere within the value chain? And I'll give you a quick example. Recently, we have seen some protests going about bread price must fall. Now, that doesn't seem to appreciate the risks, the dangers that goes through production of that risk. But it is more insufficient information. How do we communicate risk information to everyone to understand that if a bread price has gone up by whatever percentage, it is linked or related to some of the risk factors, and one way or the other, those needs to be covered. I'll start with you, Mike, from the energy side.
I think from the energy side, the pricing is published in national papers and so on. I think the one big issue in the price of fuel is the taxes. I think we're one of the top 10 taxpayers in the country, and that's largely around all of the duties and that go with fuel. So it's very important with any tax changes to communicate those impacts to the customers. And there's very little leeway of moving out of a tax impact where it's 30 or 40% of the value of the product. So internal communication is critical to get those messages out, and then from our people on the ground being able to communicate directly, and we really take pride in having people on the ground that understand the customer's business. Here in the Free State, we have a regional office with people that really understand farming and the requirements of the farmers. So I think it's really just around close communication and making sure that there aren't surprises along the way. I guess working very closely with the agribusiness corporations and working with them to inform customers.
And Jason, you just explained earlier how you educated the farmers who are basically your clients or your close associates. However, further down the value chain, there are those impacts, there is that lack of understanding. Do you take the communication beyond your closest associates?
Yes, we do. We have a number of different outreach programs that we've been involved with over the years, and we do all of our business through an independently owned dealer channel that's here across South Africa and up into Africa as well. And our dealer channel is very involved in the communities that they serve, sharing the message around agriculture, reaching out to be inclusive with that message. So I think there is a lot of communication. Is it enough? Is there ever enough communication? So I think while the industry does a really great job of working every year to reduce risk and to improve food security, and that's whether we're talking about large ag commercial or smaller emerging farmers, there's a lot of great things going on. We can continue to talk more about that, communicate that message, so that the public does understand that, there are some challenges from time to time. Overall, we're still in a much better position than we would have been without the investment over the last 3, 4, 5 years. That throughout the value chain, people have been making the investments, but also having the communication and the linkage. And I think you can see that in the discussion here today. A lot of risk is uncertainty, and the best way to deal with uncertainty is to get more people sharing what they know, sharing perspectives, and making better judgment and decisions for the future.
Okay. And then John, again on the financial sector, again in South Africa we have had some of the protests that I just gave example directed at the sector, primarily because you can mitigate or you can cover yourselves and probably your next clients as well. But beyond that, to the consumers who will eventually have to pay or absorb the, call it risk transferal, do you share this information with them or do you leave it at your immediate clients?
Well, I think what is clear is that the banking sector in general, or the financial sector, there's increasing regulation that is coming down the line, which is coming to the banks, and then obviously, is then fed through onto its customers. So, if you think of the National Credit Act, for example, that certainly has implications, and I think it is a bank's responsibility to advise its clients and to also make sure that it does its assessments properly. But in saying that, in terms of determining repaymentability, it's very important that we explain to our clients what that means, and so that there's a common understanding between client and bank as to what it means in terms of repaymentability. What are the risks of default, for example? What happens in the event of default? So all of that's very important for a client to understand. I think as well, beyond just the financial sort of aspects and making sure that your clients are, fully understand that, the investment into, such as what was mentioned earlier, the agricultural sustainability program, which is essentially investing a lot of time and effort into really understanding food, water, and also energy, and those linkages between them. Because I think in our country, it's really important that we understand that whether it's a farmer or the person buying those products in the shops, is what is this linkage between food, energy, and water? It is critical. And each of that has an impact on prices, on yields, etc. And I think it is really important that, and probably agriculture needs to do a better job as well in terms of feeding that information through to the market. Because when there's a maize crop of 7 million tons like there is this year, it means that the maize price is going to go up. So who carries that cost, And we've seen maize prices rise to these high levels. And that has an impact if you think of someone whose food basket or their total expenses is taken up 80% in the cost of food, it becomes an issue. So you can understand why people are concerned when feed prices rise as they have, and they will continue to do. And that's where I think government also has a very crucial role to play in this whole balance and this whole communication.
So it's a partnership process. It doesn't depend on one institution or one part of the sector.
100%. I think that's the right way. Yeah.
And Kubus, have you had some of those partnerships, or are you aware of some that from the input side, they help mitigate or cushion the people who depend mainly on maize or any other staple food product?
So I think the important thing is consumer education will remain critical, and that is one of the main reasons that Monsanto as a company is involved in Nation in Conversation. I think we are excellent in telling our farmers about the benefits of our technologies, why do you need to insure, why you need to buy this specific hybrid, why do you need the best mechanical equipment on the farm, use the best oil, for instance. But what is very important, that there's another risk that we need to mitigate, and that is the risk of misinformation. So, and I think that is important for a country like South Africa, because one misguided tweet or one misguided Facebook entry can cause a lot of damage for agriculture in South Africa and for the general making it sustainable in South Africa. So that's a huge risk that we need to mitigate as well.
Okay, the information risk, the sharing of that information. And I think this is when I just want to quickly go back to you, Jason, just to say now, in the technology side, in the solutions that you talked about, is it running away from some of the people that we need to help? Are we moving too fast in terms of the machinery and the equipment from the affordability of small producers? Or is the partnership that John talked about necessary to get them in that space?
Yeah, I think innovation is happening all across the different levels of producers, right? So if you go out and look at the stands that are here at the show, whether it's ours or many others, you'll see a lot of satellite technology and a lot of integrated control systems into the machines that sample data, send it to the cloud, gets processed by companies like Climate Corporation and others that help the farmers, and then it comes back down and the machine acts on it. And that's a critical part of what's happening in agriculture today. I think the other exciting piece that's happening alongside of it is you've got this evolution of mobile-based technology. Every one of us in this room and everyone watching the program probably has a cell phone, and most of them are probably smartphones. And you're starting to see some of these types of functionalities at a lower scale come down to mobile-based technology. In fact, in India here in November, John Deere introduced their first telematics and satellite-enabled cell phone solution for data and information on tractors, on 55 and 60 horsepower tractors. So it's moving into that space. It's certainly something that we're looking at here in Africa as well. So I think the democratization of technology that you've seen on the consumer electronics side, it's coming to agriculture.
Let's leave it there at the technology side. When we come back from the break, we're going to talk about that technology, the opportunities, as well as the future of agriculture, as well in the context of risk management. Welcome back to Nation in Conversation. Before we went to the short break, Jason, you were talking about everyone having a smartphone, but that is from the consumption point of view. I seem to understand you to be saying this or similar other technologies that are accessible to individuals can be used in production for cost cutting or for other efficiencies. So these are the things that they were not there 20 years ago or were unimaginable. Can you tell us about the next 20 years or what the future is like in your environment, in your solution provision, basically?
Yeah, I'll do the best I can with my crystal ball. It's still a little foggy, but I think we are in a period of time in agriculture where there's a tremendous number of new ideas coming to the table, and the barriers for young entrepreneurs and inventors to try those ideas and to see how they can help improve and build a more sustainable future for food production, those barriers are coming down. And so I think what you're expecting to see, if you look today and you look around and you see a lot of the solutions that are available, primarily to large ag commercial farmers, you're going to see those types of capabilities moving down and become more accessible. At the same time, you're going to see new things coming for the large ag commercial farmers that are driven out of this data and analytics space that are going to require and enable new types of planting approaches, new types of agronomy. So it's very exciting on both ends to see that happening. People ask us a lot, how long will it be before you have tractors that don't have drivers in them and things like that? And those things are all possible. And if you go out and Google around, you can find some John Deere tractors driving around without operators in them. So robotic tractors are out there. But I think what's really driving that investment in the industry is that the need to act on the information and the data. It goes beyond what humans can process and then act on and make decisions. And so once that happens, you have to replace the human in the cab. So long term, yeah, I think you see things like that out there. But that's not the exciting part. The exciting part is all of it is about reducing risk and improving the yield for every unit of input. And that's what the key is.
Okay. And Mike, so far we've been discussing risk as if it's a completely negative thing. I imagine there are opportunities that are created by the risk events. So within the fuel and energy sector, what are those that you are working on, or in as far as the future is concerned, that you're dealing with?
Well, I think as the technology develops, then the fuel requirements develop. We've just been talking about the various emission standards with the Tier 4 emission requirements in the States. As those get to roll out into the country, there'll be different fuel requirements, there'll be requirements for emission fluids, different lubrication requirements and so on. So I think there's risk in that happening. Our challenge is to make sure that we can supply all of those needs and I guess complement the development in technology. I think just in terms of sustainable business models, I think there's a lot of room for improvement in terms of the way we get product to the market, and we're looking at our distribution network. We're looking at how emerging wholesalers can be part of that process. So there's a whole area of development in that space. I think the longer term engagements that we have with the agribusinesses and support them, I think there's a lot closer knit and understanding between the farmer and the agribusiness than the oil business would ever be able to fit. So how can we marry those two, eliminate any risks that we might be short-sighted on, and try and marry those two. So I think those are the areas that we chasing.
Let me jump to Cobus and see if whether your crystal ball is better than Jason's. And again, in the context of the future, but as in, are there risks that are foreseeable, can be anticipated? I mean, in other words, if you know what is likely to happen, you start preparing for the responses, the reaction to that, and you deal with it when it happens, not reactively. Do you have that crystal ball?
Yeah, normally my wife is much better with these types of questions. But I think what is important is that risks are there. We see it as challenges. As an innovative company, we come with solutions to make sure that we get past these risks. Now, what is very important, up to now, many companies offered the individual solutions. One company would offer herbicide, one will offer the seed, one will offer the next and the next. And I think the next phase over the next many years will be to integrate these various solutions. And that is where the whole concept of partnership is coming from. So what you will see is that with the Climate Corporation that Kit has mentioned before, we will move close into the space of precision agriculture. But Monsanto as a company will not be able to do that alone. It will be in comparison, for instance, with a company like John Deere. And behind that, you will need a Nedbank to finance, and we need to drive with excellent oil from Engen side. So we'll see all these things will come together to supply integrated solutions. And what will be interesting in the future as well is if you look at the concept of biological products, you will see that these new biological products will then become complementary to the traditional products that we have used for many years. I would not say at this stage in my crystal ball that biological products will replace the conventional products, but it will definitely play a complementary role to make sure that we continue and be sustainable for the next many years to come.
Okay. And speaking of traditional products, I imagine banking sector has been around just as long as, if not earlier than the agricultural sector was there. So which means that over all these years and decades, we have seen changes and development to some extent that you might almost predict others. What is the future from banking and technology point of view in as far as risk management is concerned?
Well, I think what is clear is that farmers have been faced with a cost price squeeze for many decades. So that is nothing new. And I suppose by taking up technology, farmers have managed to combat that. So, because it's really important from a banker's point of view that the farmer is actually sustainable into the future. And apart from that, one aspect we haven't covered is probably the investing in people on farm and investing in your own skills and development of your staff, etc., which is really key. So from a banker's point of view, we take all of this into consideration when we are looking at finance. Our finance tends to be customized per client. So you find that the financial solution for one client might be very different to the next. But what is very clear is that we look at each client, his risk factors. We work through that with our client to understand what is the repayment ability over time. And so I don't think that'll change. Yes, some of the technology through cell phones, etc., in terms of information flows, I think that might well come into play. And as I mentioned earlier, I think value chain finance is certainly going to play a greater role going forward, which in my opinion will start to bring in some of the small-scale growers into those stronger value chains. And there will then be financing within that chain, which would then involve a financier, of course. So, nothing dramatic, but I think the important thing is that we have exceptional farmers in this country. We need to bring through a whole lot of new farmers as well to be part of the mix. And if all partners come together, we can certainly make it work. And that's what's important. If I listen to the panel, there's a lot of positive energy. Yes, it's the drought, etc. But in many ways, out of droughts or tough times come good times and good learnings. So in my opinion, that's where we need to focus. We need a strong finance sector to also support growth in this country, which is certainly, in terms of agriculture, I think has a very real role to play.
Thank you. And let's close it there at that positive energy. But also remember, there's a saying that risk is a fact of life. And we have just, in this discussion, understood and got some insight on how some of their daily lives are affected and how they deal on a daily basis with the risk. It's part of human culture, human beings, and it will always be there. But I think we need to continue to discuss these issues around risk and make sure that we do it collectively, not as individuals. Join the Nation in Conversation, download the Nation in Conversation app, which is available on the app stores. Follow us on Twitter at NationConverse. More information is available on our website, nationinconversation.co.za. Thank you for watching Nation in Conversation, and goodbye.
Nation in Conversation is proudly brought to you by Agri, Engen, Grain SA, John Deere, Monsanto, Nedbank, and Senves.
Thank you for such an insightful information. What is the next best product that the panel feels should be invented to actually help the farmers mitigate the risk of the drought further?
I'll take a stab at this one. So, as was mentioned on the panel, there's a lot of exciting new technology out there being developed, and a lot of it, is not quite at a point where it's ready to be commercialized. One of the things about our product is very much based and built for the U.S. farmer today. We're very interested, and we have a global mission. We're very interested in taking our products to new markets outside of the U.S. and are launching limited commercial launch in Brazil and Canada this fall. But one of the things that inhibits our ability to bring the full suite of products to a place like South Africa today is the availability of detailed weather data and detailed soil data. So if we're really kind of brainstorming about what the ideal technology in the future for us would be, is empowering the farmer with more on-farm sensors that enable them to bring in detailed maps of their soil and ingest it into the platform. I think we're also seeing, and this is not a high-tech solution, but it's something that we're noticing, better 3G connectivity would help enable farmers to get the most out of some of the digital products that are out there.
One important point, especially for emerging farmers, but also for commercial farmers, is affordable insurance programs. So that's more in the shorter term, but it will definitely help these farmers to mitigate the risk of a drought, for instance. Yeah, just to add on to that.
I think as well, what certainly is important is to do proper financial planning and proper financial assessment, because it is it is important to understand what your break-even is in your farming business, but to also know that if you do have a crop failure, and you can try and define what a crop failure means, but as to what that will do to your cash flow and what that will do to your reserves, and that also might then start to talk to whether you need to take out crop insurance or not, which in many cases the people that really need crop insurance are the ones that can't afford it, which sounds strange. So I think proper financial planning, cash flows, budgeting, etc., which tends to pull in all this information that's available, to run it through your financial modeling to really understand, what happens and what if. That's really important as well.
I think if I may add to the question that was asked, is that to what extent does that lead to the investment required to develop that product? We used to droughts at different levels every 10 or 12 years. So it wasn't as if this current one was totally unexpected. It's just a matter of what would be the degree of that impact. However, the point is, in order to go deeper and looking at you, Kid, the products that you have developed, the investment, does it come from government? Does it come from private sector? And then now it becomes that product that belongs to the innovator, if you like.
I think it comes from all of the above. One thing we like to talk about is the data infrastructure of a country. So in the US, over the past 50 years, the government invested in a tool called Surgo, and it's a nationwide soil map database. Now, it's not perfect, but it does provide an underlying database of what types of soils are where. And this is a really powerful tool for agronomic advisory. I would love to see governments around the world invest in that kind of tools. I also think the private sector needs to play an important role. So I think it's all of the above, and I think a lot of the players here at this table can appreciate the role of the private sector.
Yeah, just to maybe add to that as well, I think what we don't have is a very good drought forecasting system at a micro level, at a regional level. So we've known that the El Nino is coming for some time, but I'm not sure we know down to a micro level what that means and how it's going to play out. And that then involves soils, climate information, temperatures, etc. And so we tend to have a lot of weather data, but how we then apply it down to a regional or local level is not there. And I'm not sure what the solution is to who finances, etc. But I think you're on the right track.
Yeah, from the weather perspective, what we've been able to do with our weather models in the U.S. is maybe take 3 weather stations that are at equidistance from a farm and build a model that interpolates the data from those 3 different places to come up with a specific forecast for the farm that's in between those 3. Today, if you're on the farm and you call a weather service, it's basically pulling weather from the closest station to you. So I think we need more weather stations, both operated by the government and private industry, and we need to be able to bring these types of predictive analytics to that data that's coming off those stations.
Yeah, and I think from John Deere's perspective, one of the things that we're investing in is bringing forward what we call an operations center. So it's an investment in the infrastructure for capturing a lot of this data and then making it available to the different players in the ag value chain so that they can offer services to customers to help do the best possible job managing through these kinds of challenges. For the smaller and emerging farmer, one of the areas that we're focusing really heavily on is we know that part of innovation is making sure that people are using the best available things that are available right now today. And that's difficult for the smaller farmers. So we're focusing on supporting agricultural entrepreneurs and starting contracting businesses to offer services to small and emerging farmers. This allows that technology to be used quickly across many, many hectares. And in some cases, in drought, for instance, there's, of course, different grades of drought, and there's certain situations where nothing helps. But there are others where having the latest tillage practices and being able to very precisely control the depth of the planting can mean the difference between no yield and a minimum or an average yield. So we want to make those available broadly through contractors, and I think the private sector can play a real role in that.
Thanks, Jason.
But maybe just another point on just the management of water as a country. How much water gets used in the urban areas versus what is used in agriculture? And I think that's an area where we've still got a long way to go. There's a lot of wastage. And I think we've all got a part to play to improve that position.
So it's about information, it's about investment into this, but long-term investment, as I hear from what you said, Kit. But let me check if whether there aren't any further questions from the audience.
Good afternoon, Michelle Gomete, Bloomberg. My question is to Kobus Steenkamp of Monsanto. I've got two questions for you. So recently, genetically modified cotton was banned in Burkina Faso. Are you guys going to be appealing that ban? And my second question is Monsanto interested in non-GMO seeds?
So I think the important thing, maybe the Burkina Faso situation, a very unfortunate situation where there's Bulgar cotton, it's the insect protected cotton, contributed about, I think it was in the region of 40 to 50% of the GDP in agriculture there. So it brought huge benefits to the people of Burkina Faso, to the small-scale farmers, more than 400,000 hectares of biotech cotton being planted there. Unfortunately, the company that we were involved with is a government-owned company, and they are not ideal seed type of company. And unfortunately, these types of issues resolved. So we will temporarily perhaps suspend our business there. We will not totally withdraw because we still believe that our technology will bring a benefit to those farmers in those areas. So neighboring countries like Nigeria has just recently got approval to go ahead with some biotech products. So that is very beneficial for those countries. So our point of view is that the government is actually neglecting the small-scale farmer in Burkina Faso by taking this very dramatic and severe type of decision. And then the second question, which is very, very important, is that we will always offer choice to the farmer. So if you look today in South Africa, about 86% of all maize hectares planted contain a biotechnology trait. So still there's more than 10% of hectares that do not make use of biotechnology products. And within our portfolio, and I see some of our competitors here as well today, so we all offer non-GMO products, those products, so-called conventional products, without the specific traits. So those farmers have niche markets, and they will remain successful in that specific niche. And our aim is to also service those farmers. You can imagine in certain areas we have GMO-free areas, farmers that group together to supply some of these non-GMO contracts. But then if you look at Europe, for instance, we have a huge business in Europe, but totally maybe 99% non-GMO if you exclude countries like Spain and the Czech Republic. So most of those countries, Germany, France, we participate with conventional products. So we don't say the future of agriculture is only by using biotechnology products. So we will go with different solutions there also to help those farmers in non-GMO areas also to mitigate their risk.
My name is Tepisa Magema, also from Bloomberg News. Good afternoon to you, gentlemen. Okay, I've got a question for John Deere and for the manager at Engen. Talking about risk management, sir, we've seen your beautiful tractors and the beautiful technology you have. We're just wondering, within a year like this, where there's a drought and people are trying to cut down costs and stuff, have you guys seen a decline maybe in the buying of the machines and the buying of the technology? And has there been maybe some price adjustments? I mean, with the rand going lower and lower, has there been something considered like that? And are you guys going to consider expanding into Africa or into more African countries? And then to the Engen guy, sorry, Mike's dad. We all know the implications, or rather, let me say, what has been said in government about the biofuels regulations. 460 million liters, I think, is what's been approved, and it can create about 15,000 jobs. We just wonder whether it's going to be viable? If you guys think it's something that has been thoroughly considered, is it something that's going to be viable, and will it in fact yield the results that are expected? Are people lining up? Maybe somebody else in the agricultural sector can answer that. Are people lining up to plant that grain or the stuff that's needed for that to happen? And how far is the infrastructure, and how much would it all cost, do you think? Sorry, that's a lot of questions.
In terms of the industry, and I think you touched on two of the key challenges that many customers are facing in South Africa today, and that's around the drought, the impacts of the drought, the reduced yield. In many cases, their costs didn't go down, but their yields did. And although in some cases prices are at higher levels, it's not enough to make up. So customers are challenged with that. And the depreciation of the rand relative to a number of world currencies has also produced some challenges. The vast majority of larger ag equipment, particularly mechanized equipment in all of Africa, is imported equipment. So to answer your questions, yes, the industry in terms of purchasing new machinery is certainly down some this year. And I think at the same time, you've seen a variety of different impacts to the pricing of imported goods here based on the source country. And so that's put pressure on the whole industry, and it's something that we're certainly working through. When you look more broadly into Africa, I think your question was around how does John Deere see expansion into Africa and how things are going. That's a really important area for us. So back in 2009, John Deere did a complete review of our strategy for sub-Saharan Africa and made a real change. We had previously done business in a variety of different countries, typically through distributors. It had been on an ad hoc basis outside of South Africa. And we recognize that when you look for a sustainable food secure future for Africa, and you look at more broadly as you go from 2030 to 2050 and look at the role that Africa plays in feeding the rest of the world as the population grows, we recognize that we needed to take a completely different approach. And so we've expanded a very well capitalized, very professional dealer channel all the way across sub-Saharan Africa now. And at the same time, we have brought in a new portfolio of products that's sourced globally that meets the specific needs in the various countries. And that's whether it's mechanization or implements. We believe very strongly that it's got to be a full solution, that you can't just drop something in place and hope that someone else comes and completes the solution. We need to work together to understand. And you have to have the local understanding. So we've been in South Africa since late 1962, early 1963 as a company. Over the last 3 years, we've opened an office in Accra, Ghana, and we also have a John Deere office in Kenya, corporate offices, so that we can be close to customers and making investments in those areas. So when we look at sub-Saharan Africa, we look at it as a whole now, but at the same time, we recognize there's very different needs, very unique customer segments, and different partners across that geography, and we focus on that.
The biofuels, and are people taking up the opportunities?
So I think there's been a lot of discussion on biofuels. Engen certainly have been in the forefront of the discussion since 2006. I think when the first biofuels industrial strategy was put forward for comment. And there's been some revisions over the period of time. There was a mandatory uptake requirement as of October 2015, but there really hasn't been a massive interest in picking up biofuels. And I think it all goes around the pricing and the transfer price of the raw materials. I think at a own use basis, there's quite a number of facilities that are producing biodiesel from used cooking oil, and I think from a green perspective and so on, that's certainly a very positive step to take. We still just haven't had any commercial operations. I think we were sitting almost on the doorstep of the first ethanol plant to be put together, but we just haven't got a bankable project. And I think it really goes around the food versus fuel debate, and the situation where you're importing maize for food purposes, and how do you sustain that versus bringing in same foodstuff to produce fuel. So I think there's a number of dilemmas, and we haven't quite got to it. I think at the end of the day, having a transfer price that will make sense and make the projects viable, making sure that we've got the feedstock and the farmers that want to then uptake, will then see the project going. But I think until we've got that price defined, that's key. And I think the real debate around pricing is just how does that price transfer to the overall price of product in the country, and is that sustainable?
Okay. Thank you, Mike.
Maybe, Mike, what we are seeing, and it's not really related to fuel, but certainly we're seeing a lot of farmers that are considering solar energy in terms of energy, and for two reasons. One is for a long-term sustainable solution, or if they're looking to expand, then they need additional sort of energy. And so we're seeing a lot of that. And when you mentioned water earlier as well, what we are doing as well, we're seeing a lot of farmers that are investing in new technology that are leading to water savings and also energy savings. And all of this is connected. I mean, if you talk about fuel, you can't really leave out, energy, etc., and water. So I do see us moving in the right direction in terms of a sustainable solution to these problems or these challenges.
Yep, so it's about responding to the challenges and the problems that we face. But anyway, let me thank the panel members. Thank you very much. I also want to thank the audience as well as the members of the press. Goodbye.
Nation in Conversation is proudly brought to you by Agri, Engen, Grain SA, John Deere, Monsanto, Nedbank and Senves.